Welcome to the Python Technocode series. Today we're going to be looking at data structures. So this is the first video I'll be teaching you data structures, and today the data structure that we'll be focusing on is the list data structure. So without wasting much time, let's get started. What are lists? A list or sequence is an abstract data type that represents a finite number of ordered elements. So in these finite ordered elements may be duplicated. In other words, what we're saying is that lists allow you to store many items in a single variable. So we can have a list of groceries, we can have a list of names, we can have a list of integers, and we can also have a list containing various data types. In programming, we often need to store and manipulate collections of data, hence the need for suitable data structures that will allow us to achieve such goals. One of the prominent Python data structure for such purpose is the list. In Python, a list data structure is denoted by square brackets, these square brackets that you see here. So, lists are capable of storing any data type that could be int, that is integers, float, that will be floating point numbers, strings represented by str, and many more. So, any other data structure available in Python can also be stored within a list. For instance, we can have tuples, sets, dictionaries. Don't worry about them, we will discuss them when the time comes. But for now, we have to note that Python lists of items are ordered and they are mutable, that is, they can be changed at any time we want to change them. So there is no restriction that we can change an element there. If we feel like we want to change an element, then we can change it. So here is an example whereby I created a variable student, and I'm putting this list, and this is a list that I've created that contains the names of the students, and this has been actually stored in the variable students. So here, print students, I'm printing the value of the students. So I'm printing this list. Don't worry about how it will run, but we are going to do this in our practical section. So we can access the elements of a list using the Python indexes. So we have to know that a list is much more like an array whereby there are indexes. Python starts from index 0 of the list, that is index 0 will be the first element of our list, and as we move on, so this is index 0, index 1, index 2, 3, 4 and up so on. This is index 5. And also, when you don't know the last element, whether it's index 5 or 7, what you can do, you can always access the last element of a list using index -1. This is how we do it. We want to access the first element, that is this s. When what we do, we say name and index 0. So provided that name is the variable holding this list. We can also slice a list. To slice is to cut into parts or into separate parts. So we can slice a list using this notation. This emanates from the fact that you might want to do some manipulations whereby you want a certain portion of the list. So this comes in handy. Like here, it's new is equal to name and then starting from index 1, and then this colon means that we are separating between the starting index and the last index. Here I didn't put the last index, because if I didn't put that last index, that means that from index 1 here up to the end of the list. And if I didn't put this first starting index and put maybe -1 here, I'm sure it should mean that starting from the first index up to that last index. So we can change the list elements. Here, what we do this, when we do this, we are actually manipulating data, because sometimes we find out that a certain element is no longer needed and needs to be changed accordingly. So we do that also using these square brackets here. For instance, here in the list students there, I've changed the student at index 2 or position 2, that is 0, 1, 2. That is Mary is going to change to Jordan's. And here we print the element. A new file, and new file, and let me just save it as, I'm going to say examples that will sound better, .py. So Python files should have the extension .py. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to create that list of students like we did in the first in those slides that we were discussing. So I'm going to say student, this is the variable students, let's say students is equal to, and then our first student is James, our next student is Alicia, our next student is Mary, our next student is Faith, and then our next and last student is Peter. So this is our list of students stored in the variable students. So let's print the contents of this list. So I'm going to go ahead and say print students, and here I'm going to run this. You can run this by pressing Ctrl B if you are using plain text like the one that I'm using here. That may be different with your environment. If it's not running, then you have to set your own build version of it for you to run. So without wasting much time, here this is the list that we are printing the students. Now at least in order to see the type of this of the type or the data type, or what type does for students variable fall under, we could say print type. Type is a function, it's an inbuilt function that we use to see the data type. So students, then we run this. So we see that it's a class, is of the class int, is of the class list. Sorry, this is a list. So students is a list now, and let's try to access the first element of the list. How should we do that, or how should we go about that? So say now hash, remember this pound sign, I told you that it's a comment in Python. So or if I didn't, then that's how it is. It's a comment in Python. So the hash symbol represents a comment in Python. So let's say access the first element in the list. So now what we're going to do, we're going to access the first element and store it in, let's say stud1, this variable, stud1, and then we say students, and then we access the first element at index 0. Remember I told you that we use these square brackets to access the first element, and then we can print stud1, print stud1, and then let's run the stud1 is James, you see. And then let's say let's change this index from 0 to, let's say 3. We know that index 3 will be 0, 1, 2, 3. That will be Faith, right? Let's see if it's Faith. Let's run this again. See, it becomes Faith. So that's how we can access the various elements. Let's try slicing here. What I want to do, I'm gonna say studs1. Let's change this variable to studs1, like the students 1. And then I'm going to slice this from the first element to the third element. So let's try. Now see, it obtained Mary and Alicia and Mary. That was the first element was what? 0, 1 Alicia, and the third 0, 1, 2 and 3. Notice here that in Python the last index here is not included, so it ends here with Mary. So you have to take note of that. What you want to do, we want to continue experimenting with our slicing, and as I told you that the last index is not included. If you want to include the last index, then that means you have to add 1, so that will be 4. And then we know that we want to access from the first index up to the third, that is the element at the first position up to the element at the third position. The element at the third position is 0, 1, 2 and 3. So let's see what happens here. Let's run this. See what I mean? So it now gets printed here. These are the elements. And also note that here that suppose I can put this number here. Let me put integers here. Right. Without wasting our time, let's say items is equal to a list 1 containing these integers 4. Let's say health, like that. So we can print this list of items and to see what it is. So you see, Python doesn't really care what data types they are in. You can store as many data types you want there. As you see that there is a combination of integers here. These are integers, and this is a list. This is a string, I mean. So unlike the array data type in C, Python gives you freedom enough for creativity. Gives you freedom enough to explore your creativity in this matter. So this will depend on how you might want to manipulate it, but trust me, this is very important. I call this freedom when it comes to coding in Python. So what else can we do here? What we can do, we can loop through the list. I want to print each and every element in this list. So what we can do, I can use the for statement, like for I in, then I'll specify the name of the list, items. Then notice one thing, Python is a very strict language when it comes to indentation, and here is the Python syntax. I'm sure you've never seen this, but when I put a colon here, this goes with the for statement. Like we did in C, you will put some braces or to indicate, or some parentheses to indicate the start of a block of code. So in Python, when we want to indicate the start of a block of code, we put the colon at the first here, shows that it's starting a block of code, and the next line Python indents 4 spaces. But sometimes that depends, it doesn't automatically indent for you. You have to know that you have to indent with 4 spaces. So if I click enter here, this system has already done that for me. It has indented for me, and what I do, I say print I. So what happens here is that I here is just a variable that I've just created. I could say for G in items still and print G here. That's still the same. It doesn't mean that I is so special that we have to choose I always. No. So you have to do this according to what you want. So this will print me the values, each and every values here in this list. So let's try that and run it. See, started with 1, 2, 4, and help. These were the elements I printed these elements. In other words, what I'm doing, I'm iterating through these elements, or I'm looping through these elements, accessing them step by step. I'm sure when you've seen this, your creativity is now being challenged at this point. Statement here, not here that it has changed the color. It means that it's a reserved Python keyword, and in here also has changed color. It's a reserved Python keyword. And this print statement not here in blue, it means that it's a function, it's a Python function. These are all reserved for a Python interpreter. You are not allowed to use them as your variables. You can't use a variable print with a small letter. And notice that Python is a case sensitive language. Right now, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you all for watching this tutorial or these tutorials. If these tutorials are a real help to you, please like, share, and subscribe for more video tutorials. Your contribution by liking and sharing these video tutorials will give me the courage to pursue even more in creating tutorials that better enable you to upgrade your knowledge banks in whatsoever way